This computer. Okay, welcome to the Inland Valley Storytellers monthly story swap meeting. My name is John St. Clair, and I'm leader of the Inland Valley Storytellers. And I seem to be getting glary light on me. Is that the way it appears to the Zoom people?
Yes, it looks weird with the light in the middle.
I'm going to try. There's some spotlights. I'm going to try turning off one of the spotlights.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Elizabeth. It's
Hi.
been a long time.
Hi, yeah, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
quite warm today, but other
Oh,
than
yeah, it is warm.
So that helped a little bit, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, much better.
It did. Yeah.
Yeah, I turned off one bank of the spotlights up at the top.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. Yeah, we're set up in a little different place here because the table can't be moved. It has like 100-pound box of books on it.
Ah, wow.
Yeah, then we'd have to move it back.
Yes.
So let's start out by introducing ourselves. And I'm going to start with the people that are physically here. I'm John St. Clair. I live in Ontario. And
I'm Chris St. Clair, and I also live in Ontario.
with me.
With him.
And
Hi.
okay. And then Elizabeth, you want to be next?
Yeah. I'm Elizabeth Angel from Riverside, and I am very thankful for this setup so I can join the group for the storytelling.
Well, we're happy to have you here. And Yuko, you want to be next?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Yuko. I live in Mission Viejo. I met John at the Timber Mountain hiking a few weekends ago. I'm excited to join this group. Hi.
Okay. And so I think, first of all, I'll ask who has any stories ready to tell. Did you come with a story, Elizabeth?
Yes, I have a story. It is actually a story in a chapter in the book My Antonia by Willa Cather.
Would you like to be first?
Yeah, sure, I can be first.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good evening again. Willa Cather is a famous female writer, American female writer. She wrote many books, but she is most famous for two of them. One is My Antonia, about the friendship between teenage girl and a teenage boy in Black Hawk, small agricultural community in Nebraska at the beginning of the 20th century. Actually, between the two wars, World War I and World War II. So it would be 1920s, 30s, something like that. And the other book that is also she's famous for is called The Death Comes from the Archbishop. And it is an excellent book if you like the culture of New Mexico. It is really a beautiful book, you know, kind of a simple story, but it talks so much about the beauty of New Mexico. So the story I'm going to tell is a story that it is part of the My Antonia. So we talk about the years after World War I. Those were years of really very active emigration and settlers in the Big Plains, Nebraska among them. And it is this couple, two men, Russians. People call them Peter and Paul because their names were really very difficult to pronounce. So Peter and Paul were two middle-aged, youngish middle-aged men from Russia that happened to come and settle in the Black Hawk, a small agriculture community in Nebraska. What happened, how they ended up there on the other side of the terrestrial globe from Russia to United States. That is their story. They lived in Russia in a small village. Really good life. People were agriculture working. Everybody had their own little piece of land and they were busy tending for their stock and their lives, and the holidays were always celebrated in the community. Important events like weddings were also celebrated in the community. So it happens that a good friend of Peter and Paul from the same village gets married with this beautiful girl from a neighboring village. So everybody is very happy for this wedding. The bride and groom love each other, young people full of energy. And the wedding takes place at the bride's house. Her parents put together this big wedding. It is during the winter. Winters are very, very harsh, very cold, very unfriendly environment for anybody to live in, humans as well as animals. And the wedding is really very pleasant. It takes place in much joy, and the guests are partying a little bit too late. So by now it is almost night and they have to start going back to the village, to their village. The way they will go back to their village is the way they came for the wedding, in snow slides. So those slides were really big, like wagons, only that they slide on the snow, and they are usually pulled by 3 or 4 really strong horses that are used to running in the snow and ice. And usually there are the roads between the villages are kind of set in the beginning when the snow falls. So there are trails, there are really good trails between the village, but those trails are kind of like a deep trail. The sled has to stay on those trails, otherwise can really turn over or run into the snow, and that could create really terrible situations. So kind of late in the day, the wedding party start going to the village. They were about 6 full sleds with people. Everyone had 10, 12 people, except for the first one that had the bride and groom. And this one was run by the 2 friends, Peter and Paul, good friends of the groom. So they were driving the horses of that sleigh. Well, like I said, that it was winter, and unfortunately, that particular year, the winter was extremely harsh, very, very cold, lots of snow, lots of ice. The wild animals in the woods, they were really suffering. There was nothing to eat. And in Russia, in particular, there are a lot of wolves, really large population of wolves in the woods. And also during the harsh winters, they will kind of run themselves closer to the villages, hoping to get, like a sheep or some other domestic animals that the wolves could take away and take it in the woods and eat it, survive this way through the winter. Well, it happens that at that time, when the wedding party started, the wolves came up out of the woods, and they were in packs, and they were really big packs. And Peter and Paul, they look to the back and they see that it was this really huge pack of wolves, maybe 20, 25. They start chasing the last sleigh. And unfortunately, chasing the sleigh, they scared the horses. Horses got off the truck and got into the snow banks, and that was the end of it. So that last sleigh was gone. And it happens that the chase gets closer and closer, more wolves come out of the woods, and it's turned into a really bloody chase through the snow toward their village. Almost close to the village, their sleigh, Peter and Paul's sleigh, was the last one running with the bride and groom. They turn in the back. Peter asked Paul, "Are they many in the back?" And he said, "Yes, they are. There are at least 20 wolves chasing us." And they say, "Well, take the bride and throw it away, so the sleigh would be lighter and we will make it to the village." They were just several miles to the village, and got into the village. The people in the village will come back with some, not weapons. People didn't have weapons back then, but they had agricultural tools that were really very sharp and strong to fight an animal, and also torches to scare the wolves away. So they were hoping to make those few miles left in the village if they would throw the bride to the wolves. Well, of course, the groom didn't want to hear that. They started into a fight as they were driving, and it just happened that the bride and groom fell off the sleigh, and Peter and Paul ran into the village with an empty sleigh. People came out. They heard all the story. They were extremely upset with Peter and Paul. They were upset to the point that, they could have been sacrificed. And they had to leave. So where would they go? Well, they went to the Americas, whereas the hope and the safe haven for many people, good or bad. So they ended up in this community. They were very hardworking. They built the only house above the ground at that time, because at that time people live in the sod houses that were half deep into the ground. So they built a house out of logs, the only thing they knew from Russia, where they live, where they used to live. So they had a nice little house, one room, of course, kitchen and everything. But work was hard, and Paul was very ill. He had TB. So that was an illness back then that could not be cured. And little by little, he just died a little bit at the time. And Peter got to be alone. And work was hard for one person to take care of their homestead. So he started running all kinds of mortgages. So in the end, he had to sell everything and go away. And he didn't know where to go away. He went away to be a cook for a large Russian camp that were men brought here to the States to work at the railroad tracks, to lay railroad tracks at that time. That time was a time where in the United States, they were building a lot of railroad tracks. So this is a story within a story. So I thought to tell it to you tonight.
Okay, thank you.
That's the end of it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Now, we had two people arrive, and I'd like them to introduce themselves. Let's see. First, I'm going to take the spotlight off of Elizabeth, and I'm going to put it on Penny. Penny, do you want to introduce yourself? You have to unmute yourself first.
Oh, okay, fine.
We can hear you.
Not now.
Whoops, we were.
There, how's that?
That's good.
Okay. I live on the South Shore of Boston, Massachusetts. I lived in California for 30 years and was instrumental in promoting Toastmasters storytelling for a long time. I have a very, very, very brief story that I found as I was going through my files, trying to eliminate things which of course I couldn't do because all the words on paper were so precious to me. And this was a little story that I got from Barry Siegel. Some of you may know him. Barry lives in Altadena, and I lived in Los Angeles and West LA for 30, as I said, for 30 years. I moved back east 16 years ago, and people here are very resistant to storytelling. However, not everyone is, and I am going to be teaching a course in storytelling to a lifelong learning course in the fall. The story I found that Barry Siegel told I intend to use as a signature story of my own. So that's that's sort of the sum and substance of my story.
Question, can we ask her a question?
Sure.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious, why do you think they're so resistant to storytelling?
I don't know. I think they don't understand storytelling as I do.
Yeah.
I have been a devoted member of the Healing Story Alliance, which is international, for a long time. We meet on Zoom every twice a month, and we have active participants from all over the world who come into the program twice a month from India, from Australia, from Korea, from all kinds of weird places. And they come in their time zone to our time zone. And that's really been totally wonderful. So that has sustained me out. It started right after COVID, the Zoom meeting. And that has sustained me a lot over the last 3 years. I don't perform very often, but when I found the story of Barry Siegel's, I had to tell it. You see, there were 2 islands. One was the island of Brevity, which spoke very briefly, and the other was the island on too long, which went on and on and on too long. But they managed to be neighbors for a long time until the island of On Too Long had a famine, and people were hungry and hungrier and hungrier. And they finally said, we have this neighbor of ours, let's send a messenger to him and tell them of our plight. So the messenger went from the island of On Too Long to the island of Brevity. But he said, we have a famine, and it's been terrible. Let me tell you about how it happened and how long it's lasted. And he went on and on and on too long. And the people of Brevity didn't know what he wanted. So eventually he went home, mission not accomplished. But the famine got worse and worse, and people were starving. They said, you have to go back to the island of Brevity. They're bound to give us help. So they sent a different messenger this time, who went with 2 empty rice sacks under his arms. And when he arrived, he said, my people are starving. I have 2 rice sacks. Please fill them with rice. And they did. They were generous. They were kind. The rice sacks were full. And then when he prepared to leave, the head of the island of Brevity said, I'd like to explain something to you. He said, you came here, you told us your people were starving. We understood that. We saw the empty rice sacks. We would have filled them. Next time, don't talk so much.
All right.
That's my story.
Yeah. And it was a brief story. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to.
It's one of my favorite stories of all time.
Yeah.
Barry, the first time I heard him tell it, I said, what? And he said, I was so shy about appearing in front of an audience that this was my audition for the National Speakers Association.
Oh, there we go.
Cool.
And that's what he told.
Yeah.
And Barry, over the years, became president of the National Speakers Association chapter in Los Angeles. Barry is a wonderful speaker, a wonderful storyteller, and a very, very dear friend of mine. So,
Can I clarify? Did you say that he told the story you just told at NSA?
yes.
Yeah. No, I've been a part of NSA, so that's awesome.
Yeah, he is absolutely terrific. He is having health challenges now, but I emailed him to tell him that I'd found the story in my files, and I was telling it, and people were absolutely loving it.
Mhm.
So it was a very nice connection.
Right. So I'm going to remove the spotlight from Penny, and I'm going to put the spotlight here at the forum and let Glenn introduce himself because he arrived late.
Sorry, Penny, I arrived late. So I loved what you did with that story. My name is Glenn Grant, by the way. I live here in Claremont. Just moved back to my hometown after being away for a couple of years. I have somebody in my personal life that complains that I am long story long. And I said, well, that's obviously then why I'm a public speaker and a writer and a storyteller. So apparently, but and she'll always tell me, oh, here goes long story long again. So I like Penny's version, but yeah, good to be here, and was away for a few years, and now I'm back, and just trying to support the group and eventually start telling my stories again.
Do you have a story for tonight?
So tonight I don't have a story, but
Okay.
can I speak it into the ether? Because well, not the ether, but well, can I speak it into existence of what I'm working on? Because that'll help.
Oh, so just talk about what you're
Yeah,
working on. Sure.
yeah. So I had a bad month. I had a sinus infection that knocked me flat on my back for 3 weeks with antibiotics. So I had planned to tell a story tonight. But what I'm working on, which will help me commit to telling it, is I had a very good friend in my life that unfortunately passed away very early in life. He was only 58, but he was a best friend for many, many years. And so rather than stand up and share a sad narrative and make people feel depressed, I'm going to use my skills and my writing skills and creativity to pull out all the wisdoms of all the things I learned from him over a period of 20 years of friendship, and find a way to tell it in a narrative that is very unique and inspirational, instead of being what I call a Debbie Downer of a story. So that's going to take some creativity and some outlining and some real thought, but hopefully it'll turn into one of my signature stories when I'm on stage as well. But that's my intention. So
Sounds good.
that's what I meant to say. I'm going to speak my intention of what I will plan to do now that I'm healthy.
Okay. Now I'm assuming Yuko probably, are you still with us? Yeah. Yuko, you probably just came here to listen. Am I right?
Yes, I'm just a listener.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify, give you a chance in case. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
Nick, do you have a story tonight?
I do.
Okay, and let's set you up. Let's set you up so that you can face us.
Oh, good.
And position yourself so you appear on there. Either move the chair.
Yeah, that'll.
Well, we kind of have a glare there, don't we?
Yep.
On
Okay, let's switch.
Can you be a witness? Somebody can forward.
Okay.
So we can do it this way. At least the glare will not be centered.
Yes, yeah, that's better. Okay.
So recently I was going through some books that I had not gotten around to reading. And one of them was a collection of very old stories from older collections. In fact, this was a collection of medieval and Renaissance collections of stories where the editor had selected several stories each from a bunch of different collections of stories. And you've heard of the Decameron and some of the others like that. No, these are not the common collections of stories. These are the ones that Shakespeare would have been familiar with and things like that. And one of the collections of stories the editor chose was a collection of some of the German stories of Till Eulenspiegel. Now, if you don't recognize the name, that's the trickster character who was sort of based on a real person and sort of based on mythology, because some of the stories are from Germany and some of them are from the Netherlands, and all through the German-speaking lands there are Till Eulenspiegel stories, and some of them actually take place with specific times and dates, and you can tell that it was based on something that was really happening, but nobody knows if there was a real person there named Till Eulenspiegel or if they just got attached to his name. Well, this one, is one of the ones that I love because it's exactly the kind of thing that if there was a real Till Eulenspiegel, he would have done. Because you see, he enjoyed playing elaborate tricks and con games and thefts all over the German-speaking lands. But in this particular case, the best stories are about him tricking those who, shall I say, had been benefiting by tricking others occasionally. And in this particular case, there was a hospital. Now, in those days, hospitals were not renowned for making people healthier. They were places where you stored people who weren't getting healthier, and you got a local nobleman to subsidize the costs. And if the doctors in charge of it made a profit, well, you know, that's how things work. And this had patients who had been there for weeks, for months, for years without getting better. And the doctors saw no reason to change that. But you see, the nobleman who was subsidizing the hospital thought it would be a good idea for the doctors to actually do some work and get these patients to be healthy again and back to be productive members of society. And that way there would be room for other people who get sick. And the doctors were disturbed because they really didn't know how to cure these people who had been there for so long. That's why they were still there. Till Eulenspiegel heard about this hospital and about their dilemma, and he went to the lead doctor and said, I will tell you what, I might be able to empty your hospital of patients if you can pay me. If I can do this, you'll pay me 200 guilders, which was quite a sum of money, but they'd stashed aside quite a bit of money in their time of being subsidized by the nobles. Pay me 200 guilders if I can empty your hospital. I need 20 guilders of it ahead of time to set things up. The doctors thought, 20 guilders is not too much to risk. And if he can do it, 200 guilders, yes, we can afford that. With the 20 guilders, Till Eulenspiegel got himself a fancier set of clothes and hired 2 assistants to follow him around everywhere going, And he went back to the hospital. He went around and interviewed each of the patients. And the doctors were told, no, don't come near me, that will pollute the process. And at the end of interviewing the patients, he said, tomorrow morning, I think I can empty your hospital. Well, they were surprised, but they would give him a chance. And the next morning, Till Eulenspiegel came back with the 2 assistants who were still going, And Till Eulenspiegel cried out to the patients, everyone who can get up out of their beds and come out through the door of the front of the hospital, do so now. And miraculously, patients who had been there for weeks, months, years, got up and ran, walked, crawled out the door of the hospital, some of them looking positively terrified of something. But they all made it out the door. And Till Eulenspiegel went back to the doctors in charge and said, your patients have left the hospital. They must be better off than you thought, eh? Pay me my 200 guilders. And they paid him the 200 guilders, minus, of course, the 20 they'd advanced him. And he left. Now, here's what you might not know. In his interviewing with each of the patients, after he'd learned what they felt was wrong with them, he explained, I was given a secret by an alchemist, and that secret will let me cure almost everyone in this hospital. But there is a small problem. because the reason that this cure is not commonly used is that there is one very rare and difficult ingredient. And that ingredient is the ashes of a dying man. And the patients thought, do you mean a dead man? No, no. A man too sick to be cured must be cremated and his ashes used as the final ingredient for the potion. So one of the patients of this hospital will not survive the curing of the others. And the only way to measure that is whoever's sickest will not survive. And each patient that was told this thought, oh, if I don't get out of the hospital, then I won't get out of the hospital. And unless there's somebody sicker than me, I won't survive this. And oh no. And so each of the patients in the hospital thought hard and long about how to motivate themselves to get out of the bed and out of the hospital. Well, since many of these people were still sick, of course, over the next days and weeks and months, they came back to the hospital and said, well, since we didn't get the potion, we're still sick. And the doctor said, potion? What potion? Well, the specialist you brought in said that he was going to be able to make a potion out of whoever was sickest, sort of, but since everyone got out of the hospital, he never made the potion and he never made us well. And the doctor said, what are you talking about? And so the patients went over this again until the doctors at last understood how thoroughly the patients and the doctors had all been tricked by Till Eulenspiegel. But you know, not all of the patients came back to that hospital because some of them were not so sick that they couldn't be scared into being healthy. And so he did some good after all. And the 200 guilders certainly did him a lot of good.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, I have a folktale from Serbia. Long time ago, there was a king and a queen who had long wanted to have children. The king wanted his heirs to take over the kingdom when he and his wife passed on. And finally, she got pregnant, and finally, she was in labor. So the queen was in the royal chambers with the midwife, and the king was pacing back and forth in the hallway outside the royal chamber doors, wondering, is it going to be a boy? Is it going to be a girl? Well, he was quite a ways from the door when he thought he heard a baby cry. So he started walking towards the door, and when he got there, the midwife opened the door and said, Your Majesty, you have a baby boy. But the king didn't wait to hear what the midwife was going to say. He rushed into the room. There was the queen holding the baby, all wrapped up in blankets. And the king, as he approached the queen said, we have a wonderful baby boy, but, and the king didn't listen to her. He just grabbed the baby and he's held the baby up. What a healthy baby boy. But all I can see is his face. Does he have any hair? So the king took the blankets off the top of the baby's head to see if he had hair, because sometimes babies have hair, sometimes they don't. And he was curious, did the baby have hair? What color was it? And when he took the blankets off, no, said the king, because when he took the blankets off, up popped 2 ears, long ears like a donkey. This is horrible, said the king. We can't have a son that has ears like a donkey. He'll never become king. The people will not respect him. They'll just laugh at him. And the midwife said, oh, Your Majesty, things like this sometimes happen, but sometimes the children grow out of it. It doesn't have to be a problem that's that big. And oh no, said the king, this is a big problem. and we've got to take care of it. So he talked with the queen. They came up with a plan. The plan was, first of all, to have the midwife escorted to a kingdom far away with a bag full of gold coins so she could live comfortably far away where no one would find out what she saw. Secondly, they wanted to make sure nobody in their kingdom ever saw this baby with big ears. And so in order to do that, the king and queen had to do all the childcare, which is not something that kings and queens usually do. They usually sort of farm that out. There's a wet nurse and there's, lots of other people to help care, but they couldn't do that. Had to be just the two of them. And the plan worked pretty well. And as the baby grew and was starting to walk around, the ears didn't shrink. They continued to grow with the child. So as the child grew bigger, the ears grew longer. So what they did was, so that he could be seen in public, they fitted him with a special crown that held the ears down so no one would see the ears. So whenever the prince went out in public, no one could tell there was any problem at all. And as he grew, they had to adjust the crown in order to take care of the continued growth of the ears. But it worked. And the queen cut the prince's hair because, of course, the hair would grow and it would look weird to have the prince have really, really long hair. So the queen took care of that as well. And it worked very well. The young prince grew and he was smart. He was handsome. He grew to be a strong young man. The plan was working quite well. He did appear in public. The people were impressed with his looks, and they had no idea that he had these huge ears. Well, eventually, the king and queen grew old and died, and so their son took over as the king. And he continued to hide his ears, and it was working just fine, except his hair continued to grow, and his mother was no longer around to cut his hair. And after about a year of that, people started wondering, well, why is the king's hair growing so long? And so the king knew he had to get a haircut. So there was a royal barber who cut the hair of everyone in the royal court. And so the king asked the barber to come into his private chambers to give him the haircut. And when he took off his crown, the ears popped straight up, and the barber kind of gasped, and he was very shocked. But he went ahead and he cut the king's hair, and when he finished, the king said, "Now, do you notice anything unusual or different about me?" And the barber, "Well, your Majesty, I couldn't help but notice you have the ears of a donkey." The king took his sword and he chopped off the barber's head. So he had the barber's body and head taken secretly out from the castle and buried in the forest. Well, 6-7 months later, the hair started getting long again. They hired a new royal barber who was cutting everybody's hair, and finally the king decided, he had to get his hair cut again, and the result was the same. So this went on for a couple of years. Other than that, the young king was doing quite a good job, and he was intelligent and he was fair and just, except when it came to barbers. And finally, there was only one barber left in the kingdom. And this barber was way out in the far reaches of the kingdom. And he sent a messenger to summon this barber. And it was an old man. And when the messenger arrived, the old barber was sick. He couldn't travel. Now, he had an apprentice, a young 13-year-old boy, who had been training with the old man. And so when the messenger came, the old barber said, "You go in my place. I think you're ready. You're doing quite well. And the boy said, "Are you sure?" And, "Oh, yes, I'm sure. You take the barber tools with you, you'll do fine." So the boy was escorted back to the castle. And when he entered the castle, the guards kind of shook their heads because there were rumors about the disappearance of barbers. And so they took him to the king's chamber. And when the king saw this 13-year-old boy, he said, "You are going to cut my hair? You're just a boy. You can't do that." And the boy said, "Well, yes, I can, Your Majesty. I've been well trained by my mentor, and he has full confidence in my ability to cut your hair." "Okay," said the king. And so he said, "Come with me to my private chambers. That's where I get my hair cut." And when he took off the crown and the ears popped up, the boy smiled. But he didn't chuckle. He just smiled. And he remembered a folktale he had heard about warriors in a certain kingdom, that when they did brave, heroic acts, save damsel or slayed a dragon, their ears would grow every time. So he thought it was kind of cool. And so he proceeded to cut the king's hair, and he did a fine job. And when he finished, the king said, "Now, do you notice anything unusual or different about me?" And the boy said, "No, Your Majesty. I think I did a great job cutting your hair. You look wonderful." "That's the right answer," said the king. "Now, if you will keep our little secret about my ears and not tell anyone else, you will be my personal barber for as long as I live, and you'll live in comfort in this palace. But if you tell anybody else about this little secret, I'm going to chop off your head." And the boy said, "Okay." Well, it worked out very nicely. This time the king got haircuts quite regularly. It was no problem at all. And the boy kept the secret. And the king kind of grew fond of this young boy who was starting to grow a little older after a couple of years. He started talking to the barber because, people do that. They talk with their barber. And he started sharing problems he was having in the kingdom. And the boy would listen, and he would come up with good ideas of how to solve those problems, very thoughtful and intelligent solutions. And so the king really grew to like this young man now, who'd grown a couple years older. And he started sharing more and more things with the boy. There's only one problem. Have you ever tried to keep a secret from everyone that you could not tell? It began to weigh heavily on the boy's shoulders. And he began to worry that he might blurt something out and get his head chopped off. Unintentionally, he might say something. And he started to grow ill from this worry and this stress. And when his mentor, the old barber, heard the boy was not feeling well, he came the long distance to the palace to visit him. And he said, "My son, what is the problem?" And the boy said, "I have this secret. I can't tell anyone. And I'm afraid I'm going to give it up accidentally. And it's just eating away at me." And the old man said, "Oh, you can tell me. You can trust me." And the boy said, "No. If I tell you, then we both may get our heads chopped off." And so the old man said, "Okay, no, I don't want to have any part to do with it if it involves heads being chopped off. But what about the priest? You can tell the priest." "No," said the boy, "I can't tell anyone." So then the old man thought, when I was a boy, my mother once told me if I had a deep, dark secret I couldn't tell anyone and it was really bothering me, I should go out into the forest, dig a hole, and tell the secret into the hole, and then bury it up with dirt. And the boy said, "Well, that might be worth a try." In fact, he felt a little bit better just hearing that there might be a possible solution to his problem. So the next day he was feeling much better, well enough to get out of bed, get a shovel, and very early in the morning, go out into the forest, quite a ways, into a clearing. There's nothing there. He dug a big hole. He got down in his hands and knees, and he said, "The king has the ears of a donkey." And then he buried up the hole. And he felt wonderful. He just felt wonderful. And he went back to the castle with a light step and feeling so much better. Well, it was magical the way it made him feel better. But the magic wasn't only the burying the secret in the soil. The magic continued, because that night, out of that hole where the secret had been buried, grew a willow tree. And it grew so fast that by morning it was a full-grown willow tree. And that morning, a bunch of children went into the forest looking for a willow tree that they could use to cut off the branches and make little penny whistles. And they came to this willow tree and they thought it looked just perfect. So they cut off some branches and they did some whittling and working on the branches, and they made these little penny whistles, and they brought them back into town and started selling them to the people that lived around the palace in the city where the palace was in this kingdom. And the king was sitting out on his balcony having a snack in mid-morning, and he heard something. And it started getting louder and louder and closer and closer. And you see, when people blew on the penny whistle, it didn't play a tune. It played a song. The king has the ears of a donkey. The king has the ears of a donkey. The king has the ears. The king has the ears. The king has the ears of a donkey. The king was furious. The only other person knew he had the big ears was his barber, so he felt betrayed and immediately sent his guards to go get the barber. And so they brought the young man back, and the king said, "How could you? I trusted you to keep the secret, and everybody now knows that I have the ears of a donkey." But your majesty, I didn't betray you. I didn't tell a single soul. What I did was I went out into the forest, I dug a hole, and I told the secret into the earth and buried it up and came back. Because keeping that secret inside was making me sick, and I felt so much better after burying the secret in the ground. I didn't tell anyone. The king said, "Show me." So the boy left the palace with the king, and they walked out into the forest, and he remembered where he had dug the hole. And he got there and he said, "What is this? This was a clearing where I dug the hole. Now there's this willow tree." And the king said, And he took out his sword and hacked off a branch, and took out his knife and worked on it to make a little penny whistle. And then he blew on it. And instead of a tune, the little penny whistle sang. The king has the ears of a donkey. The king has the ears of a donkey. The king has the ears. The king has the ears. The king has the ears of a donkey. And then the king thought. And he thought not just with his brain, but with his heart. And he realized that the boy had not betrayed him. And he realized that it was a terrible burden to put on this boy, this secret, to not tell anyone. It was a terrible burden. And he also realized that maybe it was time for him to stop living the lie. So he took the crown off of his head, the ears popped up, and the two of them walked back together to the city surrounding the palace. And as they approached, people saw the king. And some of them giggled, some of them just smiled, some of them said some things they wouldn't want the king to hear. But they walked all the way back to the castle, and the king made an announcement that he was born with these ears, and that he would continue to be a just king, and the people accepted. And he also made some restitution to the widows of the barbers to kind of make up for that part of his ruling in the past. And so he continued to use the boy as an advisor as well as a barber. In fact, he became his closest, most trusted advisor. And as the king grew older, his kingdom was prospering, and he had taught everyone in the kingdom an important lesson, and that was people should be judged by their moral character, not by their looks. And that was a good thing for people to learn, and that helped the kingdom function even better than it was before. And as he grew old, he made sure he never married, never had any kids, and he made sure that his barber and top advisor would become the new king. And so when he died, that young boy was no longer a young boy, he was a young man and an experienced advisor to the king. He became king, and he was a just and respected king. And he ruled with the same philosophy: you judge people by their moral character, not by how they look. And everyone lived happily ever after. That's from Serbia, is called the King's Ears.
The King's Ears. There it is.
Okay, I'm gonna take the spotlight off of me. Let's see. Oh shoot, how do I do that? Spotlight for everyone. Well, maybe I never put the spotlight on me. All right, let me turn this around. And somebody on Zoom talk and see if you pop up on the screen. Elizabeth, can you say something? Let's see if you, and take the mute off, and we'll see if.
No, I didn't say anything, but I'm gonna say no. I'm glad that I joined you tonight. There are so many months now that I didn't come to those meetings because I saw, oh, it's so late, 7:30 to be there. It's gonna be too late for me. But I am glad that you put together this format that we can participate on Zoom.
We're glad to have you here, and obviously I just never put myself on spotlight because
Yeah.
Somebody spoke, they appeared.
Well, yeah, but we listened to you and we saw you.
Yeah,
So
good.
was a well done story. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. It's one of my newer stories, and I wanted to practice it because next month I'm going to be in the Eastern Sierras for a week on a mule pack trip. And when I go on these trips, I tell stories every night, and this is one of the stories I wanted to tell.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when you feel like on those meetings, share with us some of the real stories from your very special trips.
Well, the thing is, I'm not really good at embellishing personal stories to make them interesting for people. That's hard work. I like to stick to the folktales where someone has already worked that out. You know, all I have to do is memorize it. Yeah. So, Nick, are there any announcements about you should share?
Not that I have ready to announce, but it looks like the different storytelling groups around the country are trying to do some things to revive the National Storytelling Network, which the current plan is for there to be a conference, I believe, up in the Pacific Northwest next year. So that's coming up. I should have more information about it in a month or two.
Do you belong to any other story groups, or are there other groups meeting in California that are
I belong to a couple of the other groups, but it's more complicated than that sounds. I am currently a member of the of SAC, which is the California regional one, but also of the Storytellers of San Diego, because I did a performance with them a few weeks ago. And in order for me to, it's silly, but the easiest way on their books was for me to get my first pay in the form of a membership in the organization for the year. So if I go down to San Diego and do storytelling again, I can be paid from their stuff, which may or may not happen, but it was fun doing it because that was the Sam Hinton Festival, and Sam Hinton was such a great guy. I wanted to be there to help honor him. He was a scientist and folklorist. He was at I believe, the Scripps Institute and UC San Diego. And he was a song catcher. And so he took a lot of the traditional songs and found ways to pass them on to new performers and audiences. But he was just such an outrageous guy, and he wasn't really famous outside of California because that's the only place he ever really did his workshops or anything. And when he died, the people in San Diego renamed one of their festivals after him. And it's a festival with music and dance and storytelling. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah. But that's why I'm a member of the Storytellers of San Diego.
Right, and Nick mentioned the Storytelling Association of California, SAC, which I'm also a member of. And in fact, I'm going to be a storyteller for next month's SAC genre series, which is folk tales, which of course is my fort. And in order to do that, I had to get somebody to take over being Zoom host for the Sierra Club Zoom meeting that I host every month, because they're both on the third Wednesday of every month, and I'm never able to participate in SAC's thing. So that next month in September, I will be doing that.
Great. In person or on
Zoom. On Zoom. So what the Storytelling Association of California sponsors, they do a lot of things, but one of the things they do is a monthly genre Zoom concert. And so next month is folk tales. You know, there's another one on tall tales, another one on fairy tales, another one on personal stories. Every month is a different theme, kind of, stories being told, and they do pay for doing that. In fact, Nick mentioned with San Diego, my membership to SAC is up for renewal, so I think I'll just apply the money that they would pay me for telling the story towards my membership for the next 2 years, because I think it's $50 they pay.
Mm-hmm.
And this month, Angela Lloyd is representing our group. And I'm trying to remember what the genre is. I don't remember. I don't remember what it was.
That's the problem. They've got this year-long list of the subjects.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, in the next week or so, I'm going to be contacting the Claremont Folk Music Center to make sure we're on their calendar for Telebration, a live performance.
Just going to ask you that.
Yeah, we've done it the last 2 years, and we're going to do that again this year. I'm sure there's no problem. They're usually very happy to have us perform there.
What month?
It's the Saturday before Thanksgiving in November. It's always the Saturday before Thanksgiving. And I haven't been contacted yet about doing a joint celebration through Zoom, but we've done that the last 3 years with 3 different Northern California groups, where we do a joint celebration where there's 4 tellers from the Northern California group and 4 tellers from our group, and it's all done on Zoom.
Can you speak to what you think, why the celebrations have brought out so many people? Like, what's the magic? Remember the year I told my story, and I think there were like 80 people. It was just slammed. What's the secret? What was if we look at that year, what got those bodies to the celebration in your mind as you
Well, one thing that helped was having Ron Evans he brought people from Pilgrim Place.
Okay.
So there was a large contingency, and we're not getting as many of them when COVID hit.
Right.
We shut down for 1 year, and then we did a live performance the next year. We only had 25 people, and the people at Pilgrim Place there were a few that showed up, but they were worried still.
Okay.
Now maybe that'll be different this year. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I've heard there's a slight uptick in COVID this summer. Hopefully that doesn't spread. But generally speaking, most things have gone back to normal.
What's happening is COVID is having upticks, but the fatality rate has gone drastically down.
Right.
And that's because most of the most seriously risky people have had the sense to get vaccinated. And what the vaccine does is, even if you get it, it reduces the intensity of the infection enough so that it's treatable. So that seems to be working.
And they have much better treatments now than they used to. When it first came out, they didn't know what to do.
But the current things that I've seen in the literature suggests that there, between now and the end of October, there will be the next revision of the vaccine, and that if you haven't been vaccinated or updated yet this year, when that comes out, they're recommending people get that as their renewal, because it's targeted to the variations that came out earlier this year.
Right.
More specifically, because a lot of people already have enough of a resistance to the older strains. And it's kind of like with the flu vaccine, the updating helps.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. See if I can see whether that's done.
Yes, and then, I have to apologize, but I think I'm gonna sign off.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. Yeah, it's really nice to see all of you, a few of you. I hope Barbara is fine, and I hear that Angela is going to perform soon. So I will be in touch next month.
Okay, thank you for
Thank
joining.
you. Good night. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm having a hard time seeing. I want to stop the recording here. Recording.